I want to talk about good and evil in the context of human needs and the different levels of brain development and consciousness. So, we have, as human beings, an innate drive to feel sustainably good and an innate drive to avoid unnecessary levels of chronic suffering or feeling chronically bad. This orients us on an axis towards certain things that relate to our needs, that relate to symmetry, that relate to a sense of self-actualization, and that relate to brain development. So we have the reptilian brain, and with the reptilian brain, the fear-based responses of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, or ass-kissing, depending on the situation. We have the limbic brain, which is about a reactive expression of raw emotion, the development of the emotional dimension, just reactive emotion, which if we look at the fight, flight, freeze reptilian brain, it is sociopathic and predatory. And so it's about the biggest preying on the strongest, or the biggest preying on the smallest, the strongest preying on the weakest. Capitalism, bullying, might is right, lions hunting gazelles, it's all in the reptilian brain. And if you look at the service and evolutionary process of the reptilian brain, as the tiger attacks the member of the gazelle, the member of the zebra clan, that lags behind the rest. They improve the species. They remove the elderly and the diseased from the pack, because when you attack the weak, you leave what is strong in the herd to breed. So this is the form of good and evil in the reptilian brain of the sociopath. Is the sociopath, be it a lion or a human being, is exploiting vulnerabilities in the system and challenging it to get tighter, and the strongest and most competent survive. There's no love, but there is an evolutionary process. The limbic reactive aspects of engagement teach consciousness through pain and fear primarily, because limbic activity is very reactive. Has a lot to do with boundaries. It has a lot to do with beginning to communicate in language so that you can communicate boundaries more efficiently than having to push someone back or punch them. And so we have a developmental process. We have the rational brain, be it occupied or utilized by the sociopath or the reactive limbic brain, as being one of pattern recognition and distinctions. So the rational brain recognizes a pattern, remembers a pattern, responds to a pattern, and then figures out how to connect that pattern, predict the outcome of that pattern based on memories in the past and the anticipation of a future. And so the rational brain brings efficiency by saying, this happened before, and this happened, so I don't want that to happen, so let me do it this way. You have an efficiency. You don't have to repeat the loop constantly. And you also begin to see imagination. Because in order to use the rational brain, you have to reassemble models of reality that are not reality and project their impact in the future. The result is a tremendous increase in efficiency. And so we can see the evolution of nature within the human brain becoming efficient through imagination. And through imagination, we also get entertainment, because we don't actually have to make love with someone to feel the pleasure of imagining it. We don't have to eat another banana split in order to remember how good it was. And so you have entertainment coming with imagination. And you have an expansion of the probability and possibility field at an exponential level when you bring in imagination rather than just simply reactive biological learning. And so again, there's a sense of, with all possibility fields, you have the possibility of more pain, but also well-being. And every human being is ultimately oriented to seek well-being and avoid unnecessary suffering. And then we come into the empathic brain. And this is the part that combines imagination with care. So when someone puts a nail in my hand, I feel pain. Someone just put a nail in your hand, I imagine it must be very painful. And because you're a human being and I'm a human being, I care about you. We start to bridge the isolation of the sociopath and have the sense of oneness. Now, this is one of the most important evolutionary journeys in consciousness, because unless you have a sense of oneness, you don't collaborate as a team. If you don't collaborate as a team, your probability field is exponentially smaller than if you collaborate as a team. So your probability field and your possibility field as a team is bigger and bigger the more people are part of your team. So if you collaborate at a species level of partnering, what you can do as a species is billions of times more potent than what you can do as an individual. And it may be trillions of times more potent. I haven't worked on the mathematical models, but I know it is an exponential curve when you move from isolation to oneness, from small mass to large mass, from simple to highly complex teams. And as you move through each of those dynamics, from small to large, from simple to complex, from isolation to oneness, in each of these movements you have an exponential growth curve with a probability field of ultimately significantly more amounts of human well-being. Because whenever a human being wants to feel sustainably good and wants to avoid feeling chronically bad, that leverage is ultimately put towards those ends. And finally, we have the transcendent brain, where we cease to identify as the individual that is part of the group, but we identify with being the group that has us as an individual. And so when you connect with something bigger than yourself and identify with something bigger than yourself, you have transcendence, which is the highest form of mathematical well-being that is possible. Because when you identify with being something bigger than yourself, in the paradigm of wanting to feel sustainably good and avoid feeling chronically bad. And in an awareness that all energy is transformed, it's neither created or destroyed, you have the possibility to play certain roles that are needed for the larger whole that are joyful, including suicide. You can say, wow, what the whole me really needs is a few less people and more nutrients in the ground. So I'm going to dig a hole, bury myself, and enjoy transforming into the plants around me, and notice when this energy recycles back into another human being, and I'm not going to experience violation because I have not been violated. I've just moved my energy from one form to another form, and I'm part of something bigger than myself. This is a stunning level of probability when you operate as one and as a small part of the one, consciously as cooperative, collaborating units in a large matrix of energy. Much like you see, if you look at, try to get a sense of this, if you're dealing with the limbic and sociopathic reptilian brain, you're dealing linearly. So you're dealing one person plus one person plus one person. If you add a fourth person, it's just one more. It goes from 3 to 4. But when you're dealing with exponential patterns of well-being, you're dealing with multiples. So you have 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 1. But 2 times 2 is 4. So when you're dealing with the empathic and transcendent regions of the brain, if there are 2 people, you have 4, not just 2, in terms of the probability field of well-being. If there are 3 people, you have 9. And adding that last fourth person takes it to 16. So 1 is not going from 3 to 4. 1 is going from 9 to 16, and almost doubling. And so for each person you add in these multiples, the probability field, admittedly positive and negative, but if we trust the underlying evolutionary process of every person wanting to feel sustainably good, this moves towards partnering, complexity, empathy, and transcendence because it feels better. It feels better to partner with a group than it does to be at war, as just one example. It feels better to be one with and be around happy people than miserable people. And so ultimately a human being learns to participate not only in their own happiness but in others. And the sense of evil that we have emerges as we have the larger grid of reality upon which we superimpose human egoic consciousness. And then within the possibility field of egoic consciousness, we superimpose a cult or culture, which is not the whole possibility field for human consciousness. And as we develop the heuristic model of the cult, there are large parts of the psyche that are excluded and that are cursed by the structure of the cult and are cursed and curse the cult. We now have a process of creating pain by dividing the consciousness from itself and then sanctioning this part of consciousness that is good and this part is bad. Having done so and created parts of ourselves that are now bad, those parts of ourselves seek to undermine the systems that relegated them to the bad pile. And one of the ways that you can measure the intelligence of a system, the intelligence of a cult, is by how much garbage they do or do not create, or do not create as an illusion. Because there is no garbage in the universe, but there is garbage inside human minds. And the garbage is created by a level of consciousness that is capable of transforming energy into a form it doesn't know what to do with. And rather than saying that this is a garbage program that is turning energy into a form that we don't know what to do with, it turns around and says, no, this is garbage energy. There's nothing to be done with this energy. There's nothing wrong with this program. This program made something that nothing can be done with. And so it's garbage. Let's put it in a hole in the ground and get rid of it. And the same is true with people. We, as a cult, create miserable people, angry people, hostile people by violating them in various ways. And then we say, well, there's nothing to be done with them. There's nothing wrong with the program that created them, but let's get rid of them and not invite them to the party. The reality is that all excluded energy from a simplistic system will seek to undermine the system that excluded it, because reality and its possibility field functions best as a whole. So the real question in consciousness is not, is there garbage or what is it? The real question is, how can we utilize and reincorporate the energy that a faulty program mislabeled as garbage? Garbage human beings, garbage friends, garbage countries, garbage landfills, all the energy that an incomplete, simplistic system labels as stuff that we don't know what to do with, which is the real way to label it. This is energy that we've created that we don't know what to do with. But there are many, many, many valuable uses for it. We're just too dumb to know what they are. And so we're calling them garbage. And so, one of the things that we then label as evil as we cling to certainty and as we cling to the known are the parts of ourselves, the part of the ecology, that we have excluded from the system and excluded from the honor of the system, and which naturally seek to help us rectify our stupidity, our error. Because if the system is creating garbage, the system is flawed, because garbage doesn't exist except in the human mind. So the system must be torn down and rebuilt to include more of the energy that was excluded. And as this occurs, a coalition of synergy and power emerges, and less sabotage and destruction and civil war occurs, because we're not pitting one part against another. We're moving towards a system that is more inclusive and thus creates higher levels of well-being. And that's important to understand, that every system that excludes energy dogmatically and permanently without honor will be destroyed by the energy that it excludes. And that's a very important and vital part of life and living. So in a larger sense, within each of these systems, in an objective sense, there is no evil, because all there are is energy in different forms, and then there are systems of energy that exclude and dishonor other parts of energy. And then those energies attack and pull apart the system. And then the new system, if there is an evolutionary process at work, develops with more inclusiveness than the old system. And the process continues. Those traditionalists inside the system being defended will call the disruptors or the demolishers or the rebels evil, and those in the rebel or the rebellion will call the system as evil. In the Star Wars trilogy, there were the traitors, the lawbreakers, the rebels, and there was the evil empire. And the empire was evil because it didn't include values and freedoms, etc., for the rebels. So that's why they rebelled. And this is the same in every human being. If your daily routine, which is a system, does not include any part or any healthy place for some part of who you are, that part will try and undermine the routine. If you have a community and you systematically exclude one individual or shame them in the community, that individual will eventually act in a way that destroys the community. But it isn't the individual that's destroying the community. The choice to have an exclusive structure that causes suffering for the energy that it excludes is the choice to exclude the community, because it is in everyone's interest for these systems to be destroyed.